Hey guys, wanted to do a quick video. Actually, I don't know how quick it's going to be. I don't want to lie. I've been doing a lot of kind of my own gear projects for about the last 5 or 6 months, and I wanted to do a video to talk about some of the trials and tribulations that I've had, some of the lessons that I've learned. There's probably a lot of people out there that are scouring the internet right now looking for videos on how to make a backpack or how to buy, what sewing machine or how to do this stitch or that stitch. I'm not going to be talking about that sort of stuff, but I am talking probably to you if you are looking at those videos. You're out there researching, trying to figure out what to do, what not to do. So I'm not an expert by any means. I've only got maybe 300 hours sewing, actually at the sewing machine doing sewing. I've made 4 backpacks, 2 sleeping bags, 2 tents, and some other random things. So in no way am I an expert, and in no way are any of my MYOG projects awesome. But I have learned a ton along the way, and I found a lot of helpful videos on the internet that helped. So what I want to do is I want to take and consolidate some of that information down, kind of like beginner helping other beginners figure stuff out. So if you're already really into MYOG and you think you've got it handled, this video is probably not for you. You might learn something that maybe you didn't know, or you might see something you didn't know. Odds are doubtful. You've probably already figured this stuff out. So feel free to keep watching, but just so you know that this video is probably not for you. This video is more for that person that's been scouring the internet, watching every video, reading every Reddit post, reading every backpacking light post, trying to figure out where to start, what to do. And so from that, I'm just going to jump into it. Stop doing that. You don't have to watch every video out there. Just start sewing. If you've got a sewing machine, just start sewing. You're going to learn so much in your first project, whatever that project is. Just start sewing. I spent probably 2 or 3 months doing exactly that. Watching every video over and over again, repeating videos to see this one nuance thing, one nuance there, and this kind of analysis paralysis. And it was actually stressing me out. This thing that I was actually trying to do to kind of create a hobby for myself, something to really enhance my backpacking and camping experience, something that, hey, I made this, and just really enhance it. And it was actually stressing me out. I think the videos that are helpful, or the posts that are helpful initially are maybe trying to figure out what sewing machine or how the different sewing machines work, because if you don't have one and you got to buy one, that's something you got to figure out. But the reality is this: for your first projects, especially if your first project is going to be a sleeping quilt, a sleeping bag, you pretty much can use the cheapest sewing machine out there. You can buy the cheapest thing out there and not have to worry about it. If you want to make a backpack or something, depending on the pack you're trying to make, maybe you have to be a little bit more picky. But the reality is most of your projects, and almost all of my projects, and I'm surrounded by some of them, you don't even need anything other than a straight stitch. Even areas where a lot of people would use a bar tack or a zigzag stitch, you could get away with just doing a straight stitch and just going over it a couple times. I've done that on a couple of my packs, and they've worked out fine. So just stop stressing and start sewing. If you already have a sewing machine that's at your disposal, it's a friend's or somebody, just borrow it, just start using it, just start sewing. Go to Joann's Fabric or go to your neighborhood thrift store and buy some, an extra triple X large jacket and start cutting it up and using the material for something. Buy an old backpack and rip it apart, at the thrift store and then remake something out of that if if the material's thing. What I did, my first pack, which is this pack right here, I went to Joann's Fabric and I bought whatever they had on sale. This is basically like a cheap ripstop they had. This is what they called like nylon sport fabric. These clips are from Z-Packs, but the material itself, the 3D spacer mesh I got online, but the main body of this thing, it's just from Joann's Fabric, and I think I paid less than $4 a yard for this stuff. And this whole backpack, if I did it all in one color, is less than a yard of fabric. So theoretically, you could build something like this for around $4. This belt was from a 20-year-old North Face pack I used to have. Same with this. I mean, a lot of the stuff, these pieces are all reused from that same North Face pack. you probably have a lot of stuff in your house that you can make something right now. This was my first project. That's not true. I made a Costco quilt, but this was my first, kind of real from scratch project. I had no idea how it was going to come out, and at first glance, it looks great. It's a piece of trash. It's really not very good. The seams are coming apart already. The material's all fraying. It doesn't matter. I had a blast making it. I learned a ton. And what I wanted to do with it, and what I think you should do, is just throw a lot of stuff at yourself. Learn how to do zippers, right? This was the first ever zipper that I did. I tried to throw kind of all kinds of complex stuff in here to kind of challenge myself. Just do that. Get excited and sew something, anything, and it's probably going to work out. So anyway, that's that kind of rant. I'm going to go through some things. I have some notes in front of me here that are, probably things that you may want to see or know, but they're not in any order at all. They're just helpful things that I found along the way. Use a hot knife to cut your synthetic material, especially any material that frays. My first pack, the one that just fell down over there, I did not do that. I used just scissors, and I didn't do anything to keep the fraying in check. I didn't use fray check. I didn't burn the edges, and it's fraying like mad. There are obviously other ways you can do it. You can put binding on the seams to help with that. I'll talk about binding in a minute. You can use something called fray check, which I actually have used, and it does work okay, but it's kind of a pain and it's messy. I love using a hot knife, and what I bought is this little $25, I think it's called a Versatip by Dremel, and it basically is kind of like a soldering iron, but it has these tips that you can remove, and it comes with this one really sharp tip, and I don't think you can see it on there, and this thing cuts fine. I've cut Dyneema 210 with it. I've cut Robic 420 with it. I've cut super lightweight fabrics with it. It always works fine. You gotta wait for it to heat up. It takes maybe 5 minutes to heat up, and it takes quite a bit longer than using scissors. But I have not had any fraying on anything that I've cut with that thing. So for me, it makes sense. So I would suggest using some sort of a hot knife to cut any of your synthetic fabrics. It makes a huge difference in the outcome or output that you have, and you won't have to deal with any of this stuff. Binding tape. So my first pack, I used a lot of binding tape. The way I did my shoulder straps is I basically sandwiched the material together, foam as the meat in the sandwich, and then the material on the outside. I sewed around the edges and I put binding tape on the edges. What a pain. Probably the most frustrating experience I've had sewing anything to this point. Everything I've tried to really use binding tape for has just been a nightmare. So I've been trying anything I can do to avoid binding tape as best I can. Again, you might be fine using binding tape. I find it a pain, especially going around corners. Oh my goodness, it is a pain. Now, most sewing machines, you can buy attachments to help with binding. I don't have that. I haven't tried it, so I can't speak to it. But when I watch videos about it, I too watch videos, too many of them. It makes it look a lot easier. So at some point, I may actually go buy one of those and see kind of how it works. There is one binding tape that I've found that I like that is relatively easy to sew because it's very thin and flexible, and the only place I use it for is really on the inside of something that I'm going to be reaching my hand into that maybe something, a hangnail or something will rip, catch on the fabric. And it's this folding binding tape from Quest Outfitters. It's really soft. I really like that. I have a couple projects that I'm working with right now, and it's worked really well. So that's the only binding tape that I'll use. But like the thicker stuff that's more like grosgrain or something kind of that thickness, no thank you. I'm done with that at this point. So that's binding tape. Sewing machines. So if you already have a sewing machine, just use that until you know that this is something you want to do. Don't worry about going to buy the perfect sewing machine. If you're borrowing somebody else's sewing machine, understand that if you start trying to sew through really thick fabrics and stuff, you might do some damage to their sewing machine. So I might say don't do that. What I did is I read everything online that you've probably all read, and everyone says, go buy an old Singer, go buy an all metal, from the 50s or 60s, and that's going to be your best bet. You're not going to have any problems with the nylon or plastic gears, shredding out on you or anything like that. I looked for that. Everyone says go to thrift stores and go to this and go to that. I looked all those places. They didn't have anything. Couldn't find them. So I started scanning eBay, and I started scanning eBay, and I started scanning eBay, and I couldn't find one for a price range that I was looking for. Everyone said, don't spend more than $100. Don't spend more than $100. On eBay, everything was $250 for what they were describing. So what did I do? I did exactly what everyone said not to do, and I bought this Singer 4423 plastic guy. And my quilts were made by that, and my first backpack was made by that. And it works okay. I haven't broken it yet. I've broken a couple needles in it, but I have not broken the gears in it yet. It's really not the best sewing machine, to be honest. If you're looking at the 4423, I'm not going to tell you not to buy it. It seems pretty good for the price. You're paying $100 or so for it. However, trying to get the tension right for the top thread or the bobbin tension, it's a pain in the butt. Constantly getting birds' nests underneath, and it's just a real pain. I'm constantly having to fiddle with the tension on this thing. My wife actually uses it for some of her projects, and so she's doing really lightweight stuff, and she hasn't had any issues with it. So this is what I was using at first, and then I finally saw something on eBay that was within my price range, and I watched it till it got to the very end. When it was 5 minutes, I went in and I sniped it, and I got it. And it was this sewing machine that I'm thinking you can see on here, and it's a 1951 Singer 401A. The person that sold it to me, I'm assuming was an old gentleman, because he said he was a trained Singer factory repair person back in the 70s. He basically rebuilt it from the ground up. He bought it from like an estate sale. It has a rebuilt motor in it, and the price was right. I think delivered I paid $140 for it, which is more than I wanted. I wanted to spend $100, but $140. It's been perfect. There's been nothing wrong with it. I even emailed the guy back and thanked him for giving me such a great deal and such a great sewing machine. This thing's been great. I've made 2 backpacks with it, and a bunch of other stuff, and it just goes through it no problem. The foot pedal sticks a little bit occasionally, and so I might get a new foot pedal. But it's been awesome. I totally recommend it. It's totally over-engineered. You open this thing up and it's all metal throughout. Just oil it a little bit and grease it up a little bit. And I usually do drop a little bit of oil in there between projects just to get it going. And it works great. So if you can find it, the irony of this, 2 weeks after I bought this sewing machine, I was walking to my local store a couple miles away, and some elderly woman was having a garage sale. She had 2 of these sitting in her front yard for sale. $20 a piece. One of them came with all these attachments, and I almost bought both of them just to have them as replacement parts. Should have done it. I didn't do it. The next time I walk by her place, I'll see if on a weekend, I'll see if she's having a garage sale and see if they're still there, because I might buy them. But I would definitely recommend going down this route. And if you have something like a thrift store or something that sells these things, I would definitely do it. But get it serviced. Have them check the electric on it, because these things. This is a 65, 70-year-old thing, so they make sure that they check the wires and that there's not going to catch a fire. I also, when I'm using it, I unplug it. I never leave it plugged in unless I'm using it, so that the risk of it just like overheating and catching fire is lower, because again, I am a little concerned about that. Okay, so other things, presser feet. So when I started sewing, I didn't know anything. I did not know what a presser foot was. So I was just using whatever came with the sewing machines, and I was going for it. And I was having a lot of problems. The zipper on that backpack was a real problem. I remember complaining to my wife, not knowing how the heck do I deal with this. And then I finally got back on the web and I started researching it. And I found something called a zipper foot. And it's a real skinny little foot that's half the width of the regular foot, that you can get really close to the metal or plastic zipper and actually sew the zipper. So if you're going to buy a sewing machine and you think you're going to do anything with zippers, buy a zipper foot. It makes a huge difference. And again, after all the videos I had watched, I still didn't even know that this thing existed. The other piece I had a real problem with was anything stretchy, Lycra mesh. All of my backpacks have Lycra mesh pockets on them. I would start sewing and I'd measure everything perfect and I'd create paper templates and I'd cut everything out and I'd start sewing and I'd get to the end and my Lycra mesh was 4 inches longer than the rest of the material it was supposed to be. And I'm trimming and trying to figure this out. And one of the videos that I had watched, the guy was talking about it and he had the same problem trying to figure it out. And I didn't know how to figure it out. It wasn't working. And I was trying to, people say, don't pull on the material, don't push on the material, use a nylon presser foot. I didn't have a nylon presser foot. Change the tension on the presser foot pressure, all these things. Nothing seemed to be working. Nothing I did seemed to work. It was all a pain in the ass. Then I found what's called a walking foot presser foot. So there are machines that you can buy out there that are just built-in walking foot, which means it's actually moving the material from the top and the bottom. So basically as it's moving, it's pulling them both rather than just the normal presser foot. It's feed dogs, I think what they're called, are moving the material through, but the top layer is not moving, so they can move at different speeds. The walking foot presser foot actually makes the movement at the top do it too, so they both are moving the material through at the same time. When I got this doing the Lycra mesh, no problem. The most I ever have when I get to the end now is like a ½ inch difference, and it's rarely even that. Usually it's within a ¼ inch. So definitely pick one of these up. I bought one. This one is for my Singer 401A, and then I have this kit that I bought for the 4423 that has the zipper foot, and it's got a bunch of other feet in here that I've never used. But the walking foot is in here, and the zipper foot is in here. So I have walking foot, zipper foot for this guy, walking foot, zipper foot for this guy, and that's so far all I've needed for everything that I've done as far as presser feet. But definitely research those. This was like $7. These are more pricey. I think these were 20 or 30 bucks a piece. This kit though was $44, I think, for all of it. So if you can get them in mass, you can do that. And occasionally for the older ones, you can find someone selling a bunch of accessories for 40 or 50 bucks that'll have the feet you want in them. So check that out. The other problem people have, and I have, is when you're dealing with super thin fabrics. You're dealing with, the membranes, Argon 67 or the, super thin membrane, or actually you can't buy it anymore, but the material, I can't even remember what it's called, from Z-Packs that they use for their sleeping bags and such, which is really nice material. Too bad they don't sell it anymore. All of that, it can be kind of a pain, and actually the walking foot helps with that as well. But where the problem is when you're first starting out the material, it has a tendency to want to bunch up, and it has a tendency to kind of want to suck down into the machine, basically. I don't know what that little area is called, but it basically gets sucked down in there, and it's just a pain. So a lot of people online have talked about using tissue paper, and there's videos on it. Totally do it. It works great. You basically cut off a thin sheet of super thin, Christmas or present tissue paper, and you put it underneath the material, and you kind of sew through that, and then you work your way into the material, and then you do your you lock the stitch and you keep going, and then when you get to the other end, you can do the same thing. Now some people actually do it all the way through as they're feeding it. They keep putting tissue paper underneath. I haven't found that necessarily. I've just found the problems at the end. Now the reason they do it all the way through is when you set your stitch length, a lot of times on the thinner material, the material doesn't move fast enough, so you start getting these really close together stitches, and then you'll suddenly get appropriately spaced stitches, and then too close, and that's because the material is so slippery it's not feeding through correctly. I haven't had that much of an issue doing that, and when I haven't really cared too much, so I just haven't gone through the effort of doing the tissue paper all the way through. But the ends, it helps a lot. And so whenever I'm working with super thin material for like a sleeping quilt or stuffed sacks or something, I totally use that, and it works great. One of the last things I want to talk about in this video is changing your needle. Change your needle frequently. I didn't know to do that, and about halfway through my first projects, just things weren't going well, and it just ultimately, like, I broke a needle, and I wasn't even sewing through anything hard. And I learned that one is when you break needles, they can get hot from all the friction. If you're sewing a lot, or if you're sewing wrong, or if you're actually just putting too much pressure on the needle in general, they can get hot, and the metal starts to get not super strong anymore, and they break. A lot of times you break a needle. I broke, I think, 3 needles. It's because I'm going through too many layers of webbing or something for the size of the needle. The needle was just too thin for what I was trying to go through. But change them a lot. And what I've noticed, and I don't know if this is a real thing, but this is what I think I noticed, is when the needle starts to get dull and I'm sewing, the needles, you'll start hearing a popping noise as the needle's going through. And it's hard to describe other than a pop, but it's as it pierces the, actually I don't think it's actually piercing, it's forcing its way through the material, and it's popping it almost like tapping a drum. And so you hear this pop, 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 versus just a really silent needle going in. When I start hearing that, I stop what I'm doing, I change my needle. They're not very expensive. Definitely keep extras in your in your kit so that you can switch them out. I switch it out before every project, and if it's a big project like a backpack, I'll switch it out somewhere in between also. I think that's all I wanted to say for right now. Those were the main tips that I found that I wish I would have known at the beginning, that I didn't, that would have made all of my projects that much easier, rather than kind of learning them on the way. I'm going to do another video and kind of talk about the packs that I've made next, so it'll post soon after this video posts, or around the same time that this video posts, to give some tips of what I've learned making these packs. If you have any questions or anything that, from a sewing perspective that I might be able to answer, if it's how do I do this seam or how do I do that seam, I'm not going to know that. I know how to do a flat felled seam, I know how to do a French seam, and I know how to do basically a straight stitch. So that's all I really know how to do, and that's all I've needed to do. But ask a question. If I know the answer, I'll answer it. If I don't, I won't answer it. If you have any questions about the 4423 that I bought, happy to answer what I know. Same with the 401A. I've got more hours on the 401A than I do on the 4423, but I can try to answer those questions as well. Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful at all, feel free to like it. Feel free to subscribe. I'm going to continue doing some MYOG videos as I learn new things or as I find new things to share. I'll label them with MYOG series so you'll know which ones to watch if you're just interested in those things. You're not interested in the regular kind of gear review or gear update videos. You don't have to watch those. So thanks again, and have a great day.